Hi, my name is Benjamin Britton. I'm an artist living in Athens, Georgia, and welcome to my studio. My studio right now is the hallway, the entryway to my house, and I've been working here for about a year, making paintings. You can see I have a setup here. I lean the painting against the wall, and I have a couple of reference photos I'm working with. For these large shapes, this is how I start a painting. And you can also see that at the beginning of the painting, I make these drawings of kind of like little holes or portals in the surface of the painting, and I cover them with masking tape, cut them out, and that's something I do at the very end of the painting. After painting on them for a long time, I peel the masking tape off like a sticker and then go ahead and paint in like a little image within an image. There we go.
Hi Ben, thanks so much for talking to me today. I'm so curious what you're working on right now.
Oh, well, thanks for coming over to visiting the studio. Right now I'm working on one big painting that's actually made up of 5 different panels, and when they're all put together, when they're all put together, the painting is going to be probably about 2.5 meters tall by 10 meters wide.
Wow, that's pretty big. That's like the size of the side of a building.
Yeah, each one takes me about a couple months to make, and altogether I've been working on it for about a year now.
Oh, wow, very impressive. Well, that definitely brings me to my next question. I'm curious what kind of materials you use and what kind of tools you use to make these paintings.
Well, I use kind of, classic paint stuff. I use acrylic paint that washes up with water. I use oil paint, and in all kinds of colors. Oil paint comes in jars, and acrylic paint comes in jars and tubes. I use sort of traditional brushes, larger house painting brushes, and also I like to use these knives that are used for applying like joint compound or mud to wall boards and different kinds of construction purposes. They give you a really straight line, and if you use them this way, kind of smooth them out against the paint, they make the paint really smooth on the surface. And I've been thinking a lot about surface lately. A lot of my ideas kind of come from the landscape and from nature, I guess, and I think that texture is a really good way to think about different kinds of natural environments. And when I'm painting, I try to lift a little bit of a color, take a color out of context, out of a landscape, and maybe a texture, and make it into my own shape. And you can kind of see behind me all the different kind of abstract ways that those colors and textures sort of play out in an image. I also sometimes use this airbrush or paint spray gun, and I can put whatever kind of acrylic paint I want in there, and then it comes out like a spray paint. What else? Oh, also use masking tape in order to get these really hard edges, and I use an X-Acto knife to cut out the shapes so that I can make curves or different kinds of more complicated shapes.
Interesting. So it seems like you really actually build these in some ways, less than painting them.
There's a lot of different stages and layers to the paintings, and I like a painting to have a lot of information, a lot of fun places to go, a lot of different kinds of angles and ways to cruise through the painting, and sort of different speeds that you go when you look at it. Basically, I want my paintings to make people feel like they have supervision.
Oh, very interesting. So I'm curious what you think about the idea or theme of islands.
Oh yeah, islands. Well, I think a lot about the coast and the coastal environment. I mean, my paintings are inspired by ecology and also our idea of ecology as people, or how we think about it, which is what word we usually call that, a landscape. And I'm really inspired by kind of moments of profound beauty in the environment, in the landscape. So I guess coastal places have always been a really source of inspiration for me. And if I'm in a coastal sites and I'm seeking them out, a lot of times I'm on an island. Like, an island is definitely part of that. And so I think a lot about it that way. But then also, in my paintings, and you'll see this in the one that I have at Ballinglen, there are these kind of images within the image that sort of float on the surface, almost like there's an illusion of them being kind of carved out by some kind of, I don't know, like process of erosion, like a canyon, or maybe like it's a wormhole, it's kind of gotten eaten out, and you can kind of go back in the painting, and then there's a little picture. It's a lot of times another landscape or something like that. And in a way, those kind of ideas or those images are like floating islands in the painting. They make a kind of archipelago of different moments. And the whole painting represents like a period of time, or a place in time, like a kind of, that contains both past moments and present moments and future moments. And that, for me, is it's like an image or an experience that represents or it's a painting that represents what that whole experience was for me. And so that's what the paintings are about, kind of like how where we are right now is always a combination of where we were, where we are, and where we're going.
Fascinating. It sounds like you're connecting memory and time to being kind of like a series of islands, a series of moments in our lives.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
That's really amazing. Thanks so much for taking a minute to talk to us today.
Oh, thank you so much.
Yeah, bye.
Thanks for visiting.
You can see, got a palette, a couple of places to mix paint. I like to mix up a lot of paint before I get started, always. Really just check out the differences between the colors. It's a nice way to warm up. Use photo references for color. Just pictures I've taken along the way. Sometimes they're sort of more of a landscape, other times kind of a more human-made kind of scene. Definitely always looking for an interesting interaction between the conditions of weather and landscape, built environment. Looking for shapes and edges, different kinds of textures, colors, structures, windows, spaces, things that I can bring out and maybe make them a little bit less nameable, but so that they just kind of spark your memory of where you've been. Here's how those windows, or those little portals or wormholes, look like when they're finished. They all each get a little bit of an image that you can see. Some waterfalls. A scene from a swamp. A bend in the river. Book I was reading. A little bit of a breakfast. A spider. Another waterfall.
Living in Venice is a dream come true for me. This is my window onto the world. I like to think of the Italian writer Italo Calvino's words on Venice when he says that while you are on the insula, you feel like you are on the smallest area of land, but as soon as you come out of the water door, you are connected to a borderless dimension which links you to the rest of the world.
My name is Déirdre Kelly. I was born in London, England, to an Irish family. Here we are today at San Marcuola in my studio. Venice is not one island, but a series of many islands. 120 insulae. Here we can see them cut out individually, their distinctive shapes being formed by the water. Much of my work revolves around the map of Venice, looking at how it developed, growing, seeming to me rather like a nest in the middle of a tree made up of the tributaries of water coming into the lagoon. Venice is situated in a lagoon surrounded by over 177 canals, the most distinctive of which being Canal Grande, with its S shape, looking rather like a fingerprint in the water. The map of the canal waterways exists in the minds of the gondoliers and the people who drive the boats around Venice, making the waterways navigable, rather like roads in normal cities. Here we see Canal Grande stretched out into a straight line. I very often work in the form of the book. Islands and bridges. If we look again out my window view, you'll see that once upon a time the main doors of the Venetian palazzos opened out onto the water. Notice also the bridge. There are nearly 500 bridges in Venice, making the city navigable by foot. In fact, many people think of Venice as a labyrinth, but one sure way of not getting lost is by following the water's edge. The map of Venice is made up of 6 different areas: Sestiere, Dossoduro, Santa Croce, San Pollo, Canareggio, San Marco, and Castello. Thinking about a relationship between mapping and our mind, I thought about the fact that the brain is also separated in different shapes. So I thought it'd be fun to translate the map of Venice into the shape of our brain. Once you've made a tracing, you can move it over the map area underneath to choose the best shapes to match the best areas. Here I've left, obviously, some space to show the very distinctive Canal Grande. When it comes to cutting out, I like to use scissors. I choose the right size scissors for what I want to cut out. Keeping the scissors still and moving the shape around gives me a lot of flexibility. Sometimes I need to use a knife where there are more intricate areas or internal areas to cut out. Be aware that when you cut out a shape, you're left with both the positive and the negative. I like to use tweezers to hold the shape and find the best place to place it on my collage until I decide where I'd like to finally stick it down. Sometimes I don't use scissors or knife, but actually just look to tear the paper. Edges are very important, especially in collage, where one part of the image touches another, we get the dynamic relationship. Here, when you tear, you end up with this wonderful feathered edge. Some scissors are made to give you special decorative edges. Again, once you cut, you end up with two edges, and it's the juxtaposition of those two pieces which create the interest in the picture. The island of Burano here in the Venetian lagoon is famous for merletto or lace making, and I like to cut out the islands and look at how the shape of the island is determined by the water's edge. The story goes that while the women were waiting patiently at home for their men to return from fishing, they started making pieces of lace using their fine cut-out threads. In a way, the merletto, the lace, looking rather like a reflection of the fishermen's nets, floating on the water, as it is the water that determines the edge of the island and the island shape. Here my individual islands make up an isolario, a collection of small islands. I very often use a sketchbook to work out my ideas before taking them into a larger scale. Working small to work out your idea then allows you to take it to a larger scale.
Hi everybody, I'm Joanna Kidney and I'm delighted to be here as part of Ballinglen Arts Foundation's schools programme. Normally when I'm on residency at Ballinglen I get a visit from the schools programme, and it's part of the residency that I really enjoy. At this time the studio visits are happening online, so I'm going to show you around my home studio today. I believe you'll be making work around ideas of islands, which sounds great. The work I'm making at the moment is around ideas of language. So I'm going to show you some of the work and tell you a bit about the processes I use to make it.
So here's my studio from the entrance door. And the studio is in the back garden, right behind my house, which is super handy for getting here every day. So I'm going to take you over first to this group of paintings. They're called the Transmitter, and they're the starting point of the body of work I'm working on at the moment. And with these, I wanted to figure out the language of lines and marks and shapes. It felt like an updated language for me, an updated drawing language, where I needed to explore different lines, marks and shapes. And I decided from the beginning that I was going to work mostly black and white with them, that I wanted to leave colour out so I could concentrate and focus on the lines and the marks and the shapes. But then I reached a point where I was ready to start exploring colour. So this is a group of small paintings that I've been doing to explore colour, more saturated colour, different colour combinations on a small scale so I can learn quickly. And then I've brought them into these larger paintings. What I've learned I brought into these larger paintings, which are 40 by 40 centimetres square. And down here on the ground, you can see I'm making some of the paintings. I've painted the background colours, and what I'm doing here is I'm exploring colour, which colour combinations might work best on the different coloured backgrounds. And I use these cutout shapes to do that. And also these colour swatches that I paint are very helpful for me to decide how light or dark a colour I might like to use, or how warm or cool a colour I might like to use for the lines and shapes. So over here, I'm going to show you my painting table, which is where I love to make my paintings. I work with a paint called Encaustic Paint, which is molten pigmented beeswax. What I have here is a vat of encaustic medium, which is the transparent beeswax mixed with a small portion of damar resin, which is used to strengthen the paint. And this is the base of all pigmented paint, this encaustic medium, and it's also used to extend the paint a little bit like water is used to extend watercolour. So with encaustic paint, you work on a heated palette like here with a thermometer to keep an eye on the temperature you're working with. And here's a block of encaustic paint, green gold, transparent paint made by R&F Handmade Paints in New York. They're beautiful paints. So you can work directly on your palette like here, melting your block of paint, or you can work in cans and melt the paint in cans if you want to get bigger, more loaded brush strokes. So with encaustic paint, most commonly we work with hake brushes, which are very fine hairs from goats, and that allows you to get a smooth brush stroke. You can also work with any other natural bristled brush. This here is a hog hair brush, which has more textured brush stroke. Just so long as they're natural, you can use them with the heated wax. One thing which I really love about encaustic paint is that you can subtract with it. So you can take away layers from the surface or work into it as a ground. So here are some of the scraping tools I like to use to scrape my paintings. This blade here is probably the one that I use the most, and I would use it like this to scrape the surface of my painting to take some of the top layers off. And this is an exciting way to work because you never can tell exactly what's going to be revealed in the history of the layers underneath. I also use this blade to more or less erase the shapes and lines as I'm working. If I don't like how they're going or I want to change the shape of them, I'll use my blade to cut in and reshape them or totally erase them. And this would be some of the kind of wax that you would get from scraping the layers off top. And the other thing that I really love about encaustic paint is that you can incise into it as a ground with any sharp metal object. You can work into it, draw into the ground of it, making your lines and marks into it. A little bit like you draw a drawing into sand. So this here is a corn on the cob fork, which I would have used here for this double orange line. This is a wire brush, which I probably used for these scratchy grey lines here. This is a test piece I had for one of my workshops. And once you've incised your lines and marks, R&F pigment sticks are a great way to fill them. So this is oil paint in a stick, which is much more convenient than working with tubes and brushes. So I can draw it straight onto the surface there, rub it down into the grooves of the lines and the marks, and then wipe it back just to reveal what I've drawn onto the surface. So those are the reasons I love to work with encaustic paint. I feel I can very much make drawing work with it as a paint. And over here I have my drawing table, which I often come to at the start of a day to warm up, to keep fluent with the language. And drawing quickly, making many small drawings like this allows me to discover new lines or shapes or new things about composition. Allows me to test things out easily and be more playful. And a little bit similarly, being playful, I work with small objects. So the Movable Drawings project is an experiment with making temporary drawings. And it's an open invitation to anybody who would like to make some of their own movable drawings. It started out with me playing with my collection of objects, which I have been collecting for many years. I pick up any object that I like, the shape or the colour or the texture of. From anywhere I go, beach, forest, from the pavement, from the kitchen, from the shed. Discarded things, leftover things, fragments of things, and I store them in boxes and trays and take them out when I feel I need to be more imaginative and playful in the studio. So here's a temporary drawing I made for us to look at today. You can see I'm using 4 sheets of plain white paper to create the edges of the drawing. So I wanted to tell you a bit about the objects in these drawings. Every object has a story about its being, how it was formed or made, how it decayed or broke apart, maybe where it was collected, who was there with you. And I like to think about the stories of objects around me and all the people who might have been involved in its lifetime. It reminds me that we are all connected in some way or another to many people and to many other living things. So right here I have 2 little objects that I found on a beach nearby where I love to go with family and friends. And I love going to this beach, the North Beach, because you can always find lots of fragments of things, fragments of plastic or fragments of pottery or clay or tiles washed up or from the landfill that used to be right beside it. And here we have a dried out leaf which came from my garden, from a bush called a smoke bush, which was a very special gift from my friend Kathy. And this piece of paper here has curled up, so I like the shape of it and I like the colour of it, but most of all I like the story behind it. So for my birthday last year, my daughter left me lots of notes on post-it stickies like this around my studio, under things and beside things, and I kept finding them in all the days and weeks after my birthday. And this little object here, what's this little object here? That's a dried out slice of carrot. So I began drying out food and peelings from the kitchen, from making the dinner over the past year, when life became more home-oriented with COVID. And the last thing we'll look at here, this scratchy set of lines, that's my son's hair. So I've been cutting everybody's hair, all the family's hair since COVID, because now the hairdressers are open, and I really like the scratchy lines of this collection of hair here.
Here's some of the movable drawings I've been making recently, and I photographed them and put them up on Instagram with the hashtag #MovableDrawingsProject. So that brings us to the end of the studio visit. I hope you all enjoy your Islands project, and maybe we'll meet in Ballinglen one day.
I hope you enjoyed seeing the artists in their studios. Each artist takes a look at the world around them, and then using their imagination, they make their work. We're going to use islands as our starting point, as something to get our imagination working. There are lots of different types of islands. An archipelago is a group of islands all living together. Imagine islands in a river are called an eyot or an eight. Can you say that? I like to think about imaginary and other islands. What would you call an island in the sky? There are such things as a kitchen island. Do you have one of these at your house? There are unfortunately floating islands of plastic. Can you imagine being a fish on a swim and seeing that? We are all trying to do something about that. Some islands are made by humans and are very crowded. Some islands are very small. Can you imagine being the person who wakes up and looks out this window in the morning? Can you imagine? Our imaginations are good for making pictures and sculptures, making up stories, and also for solving problems. It can be fun to imagine what somebody else's life is like. Sometimes when you're imagining, it looks to other people like you're just sitting around. But they can't see the wonderful worlds that are springing up in your mind. Sometimes your imagination can conjure up things you are afraid of. But not to worry, just keep imagining and think of a powerful, kind, helpful being for yourself. Super pig, super pig. In your imagination, anything is possible. Your dog can talk, maybe you can fly, crows have spots, anything. So now it is time for you to invent your own island world. Think about the shape and size, temperature and colour. Imagine who the inhabitants are and what they eat, where they sleep, what do they do all day. Using our hands, eyes, ears and whatever materials you have around, you can get started drawing, painting or making your island world. And remember, a mistake is just an opportunity to try something new, to go on an adventure. Once you have made something you are happy with, take a photo. An adult will help you send it to us and we will put it in a special exhibition so other people can see it. Can you imagine?